Welcome to the WTR Small Cap Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by John Lai, CEO and President of PetVivo Holdings, OTCQX ticker symbol, PETV. Also joining us is my WTR colleague, Robert Sassoon, WTR's healthcare analyst. PetVivo Holdings is an emerging biomedical device company currently focused on the manufacturing, commercialization, and licensing of innovative medical devices and therapeutics for companion animals. John and Robert, good morning, and thank you for joining me.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tim, and good morning, John.
John, let me start out by asking you to tell our listeners about your professional background, and then please provide us with a 30,000-foot overview of PetVivo's business model.
Sure. I was brought into the company to commercialize the studies that the company had did from the Mayo Clinic. We were funded by the Department of Defense to the tune of $8 million for the human side of the market. We went in initially doing human clinicals, and then when I joined, I said, let me take it to the animals first. It's a lot easier getting through the animal side of the FDA. My background is I've always focused on companies that had a unique niche technology where I felt that the industry would go that way over the next 5 to 10 years. So I take a really long-term approach, and over my career, it has really worked out. I've had more calls that were correct, and some of the calls were correct, but just timing was bad because technology didn't catch up to those calls until much later. I've had good success, and PetVivo is unique in the sense that this technology was developed at the Mayo Clinic, and getting funding and peer review all the way through made me feel really comfortable coming into the company. So PetVivo Holding is truly a holding company. We have 4 wholly owned subsidiaries. PetVivo Animal Health, which is the sales, marketing, distribution of our animal health products. We have the human side, which we'll talk a little bit later about how we partnered up with BioPiezo, a company from the University of Connecticut that's commercializing their technology with ours. And then PetVivo.ai, where we're coming up with solutions for veterinary doctors to reduce their onboarding of patient costs by about 80%, and customer acquisition costs between 80 and 90%, making it way more efficient for the clinic to operate. And then we have our 4th wholly owned subsidiary, which is the manufacturing of these particles to the human level standard. Right now, our production area is ISO 5, 7, and 8 certified as a human medical device. That's not required for the animal health space, but we decided to take that extra step since a lot of our scientists and engineers and so on come from the human side of the market.
Great. Well, thank you for that overview, and I'll turn it over to Robert to ask a few questions.
Okay, thanks, Tim, and good to have you on the podcast, John. Before we delve a little bit more into your company and the business model, can you start by giving us an overview of the markets you are serving and the market opportunity that they present specifically to PetVivo?
Sure. Right now on the PetVivo animal health side, we are targeting towards osteoarthritis, lameness, and basically rehab after surgery. We're finding out that our particles, once it's injected into an area where there was surgery and so on, it seems to recover significantly faster than if it's left on their own. Or from an injury, we're finding out that the recovery time is significantly improved. So what we have developed is a protein particle matrix that mimics cartilage. So once it's injected in, it starts to form a scaffolding, an area where cartilage used to be, but then it migrates to the outer synovium and looks for defects when the synovium fills in the area where there's the defect. And then the body absorbs these particles as its own. So we're creating a long-term solution. We're addressing the problem instead of just masking the symptoms like what most people do. They come out with an NSAID that will mask the pain or some type of anti-inflammatory to take the inflammation down. Our job is to create long-term stable joint function to improve the quality of life of the animal without the use of pharmaceuticals or biologics.
Right. Just taking that on a little further, can you give our podcast listeners an overview of the suite of products PetVivo supplies and why you
Sure.
think, and I know you partially answered this, why you think each of these products is important to veterinarians and ultimately to animal owners?
Sure. The first one is Spryng with OsteoCushion technology. That's our flagship product. I gave the description. It's a naturally derived product. The second one is Precise PRP. So this PRP is the only one that's been reviewed for safety by the FDA, and it's a vial that is off the shelf. So traditional platelet-rich plasma is you got to draw the blood and platelets from the dog or the horse, and then you put it in the centrifuge. You enrich it, so it takes about half an hour to 40 minutes to spin through the process. Then you got platelets that you re-inject back in the animal, and you hope to bring down inflammation and create some type of repair. A lot of times, the reason you do not have success is that the platelets are weak in the animal to begin with. So you're drawing bad platelets and then you enrich it and it doesn't hold. We guarantee 4 billion platelets per vial. And the advantage is you don't have to go through the centrifuge. So there's a major time and cost savings for the veterinary doctor to do the injection in, and knowing that they got a consistent platelet count that's going to be more than what you could naturally draw from the animal. So that's a major advantage. Another product that we anticipate first part of next year, we haven't come up with a name yet, and that's the partnership with BioPiezo, the company that the University of Connecticut developed to commercialize their development of nanofibers. So Connecticut reached out to us probably 2 years ago and wanted to use our Spryng particles and incorporate it with their nanofiber technology. So what the scientists and their studies have shown is that once they incorporate it and inject it into the joint, the mere movement and pressure that's put on the joint is creating an electrical field around our Spryng particles. And the Spryng particles are with the electrical field is drawing peptides, cytokines, and cellular structure to the area. So your own body's identifying what's missing in the area, bringing it to that area, and causing a repair to the area and regeneration. So you'll see some of the interviews I did with Dr. Lin and so on. He talks about how they're regenerating cartilage in small animals. So the next phase now, what we're doing with them is going to large animal studies, and we got them to do it with horses and dogs instead of sheep. Universities are used to using sheep and pigs, but we got them to do there because I think that is more powerful data for the veterinary doctors when we introduce this next phase of products into the market, that we can show through clinical science as well as filing it with the human side of the FDA for an IDE. They accept that data. It makes that data extremely powerful. So we have other products coming along that we'll be announcing over the next 90 to 120 days that are based off the Spryng and the nanofiber technology, because we're finding a tremendous amount of efficacy in the product in terms of speed. We always believe we would help restore joint function, but it was a slower, much slower process. But with the electrical field that's being created, it's a much faster process.
And do you anticipate that actually being translated to humans at some point in the future?
Yeah, that was the whole reason Connecticut reached out to us, was humans. And actually, the interesting thing is there was an article on the University of Connecticut website where the president talked about, we were talking to some of the scientists, and we're working on something really cool where a single injection can eliminate the need for joint replacements in people, and you can imagine how big of a market that is and how transformative from a cost saving standpoint that would be for Medicare as well as insurance companies, because A hip replacement's 50,000 just for the surgery, but then you have 25,000 for the rehab. And that's where a lot of the failures occurs during rehab. People may not be able to rehab. So this single injection injected into the joint may prolong the need for surgery down the road, but still offer a tremendous quality of life. And there's a certain population that have comorbidities like cardiovascular issue, pulmonary issues, obesity that may never be able to rehab, so they never prescribe the surgery and they live in pain. There's an option to provide an inexpensive solution. And I think the insurance company will catch on to this and just tell every orthopedic surgeon before we're going to authorize a $70,000 surgery, do an injection to see if you're able to get good relief and reestablish quality of life without going into the stress of surgery.
Sounds a fascinating proposition anyway. Can you then just describe the competitor landscape and explain to us how PetVivo differentiates itself from the competition with those products?
Sure. So we're usually classified in as a hydrogel. So the product is administered into the joint through an intra-articular injection. Most hydrogels, actually all the hydrogels that I know of, is a synthetic base, polyacrylamide and so on. So when they inject into the joint, it does something pretty similar to ours, but the difference is ours gets integrated into the body as its own particles and then goes out. The polyacrylamide tends to stay in the place, so the more you inject over time, it just builds up. And surgeons will tell you that when they go to the joints. And I think because of that fact, we have a regulatory tailwind in our favor when it comes to horse racing. Thoroughbred horse racing is governed by HISA, Horse Integrity Safety Authority. They actually wrote into the rules like last year that any vet injecting a racehorse with polyacrylamide will be subject to fine and suspensions, and the horse is prohibited from racing for 6 months. But right in that same rule, they wrote that Spryng can be used with the standard 2-week prohibition, which was the first time I've seen where a regulatory body put out a rule, but name the product that you can use. They usually never name a product. It just says, you can't do this. Come to us on individual basis or something like that. And I think a lot of that had to do with a veterinary doctor that I didn't even know testified on our behalf. They were asking him for his opinion on what is a good product, that alternative to what's been used out there, because they were going to ban it all for 6 months. And he came up and said, I've been using Spryng the last 3 years, 4 years, and gotten great results. And the joints have been totally sound with no adverse side effects. So I think his testimony to HISA gave us that approval.
That's amazing. So PetVivo's IP, manufacturing, and clinical evidence are all in regenerative medicine. But you mentioned in your introduction that buzzword AI. Agentic PET or Agentic PET is software you license from Digital Landia under a white label agreement, meaning you don't own the technology and you don't build it. Is PetVivo.ai primarily a customer acquisition channel for Spryng and Precise PRP, or is it a standalone SaaS business that needs to stand on its own? That needs to stand on its own P&L. And how are you allocating management attention and capital between your AI venture and your core biologics business?
The good thing is the partnership forces them to pay for all this continue improvement to the system, the functionality, the costs associated with managing it. So we wanted to take this approach because we felt they were leading edge in the area of agentic AI. So from that standpoint, it's an exclusive 10-year license. Over time, as you know, technology will become so advanced that I don't need an exclusive partnership. So we can probably eventually go to an off the shelf. But right now, we're at a point where we're ready to launch the system. We just have a group of vets trying to break it right now. So we tell them, do everything you can, try to fool it, put an elbow in and an x-ray of an elbow and say it's a stifle, see if it can figure it out, stuff like that. So I think we're pretty close to giving it the thumbs up. So what's unique about this is it has 10 different specialists from urology, hematology, behavior science, and urology and fecal matter and so on. So each one of those apps or experts is already able to take the veterinary exam for its area and pass it. So the key here is to have an open platform system that a veterinary doctor can load and just pull data from all the existing systems they have. So if they need to pull x-rays, they need to do that. The system will pull it all together and give it to the doctor in a summarized form, and they can go into as much detail as they want. So that saves a lot of time from either the office manager or vet tech to onboard all this data for a new patient or give the doctor a very good analysis. Then there's a super AI diagnostics function or a super vet. They can click it and it brings it all together to give the recommended analysis to the veterinary doctor and give secondary and tertiary. Then the veterinary doctor can choose what they believe the diagnosis is, click it, automatically translates it into common person's language where the pet owner can understand. So if they have the app, they're able to see, and then the pet owner has a wellness function where they can click and it'll tell them, okay, this is your condition of your dog. This is how you can work to help improve the quality of care for your dog is that your dog needs to increase exercise by 10 minutes a day. And these are the foods you should be buying for this particular dog at the store. And then we provide a list of recipes that you can make yourself for the food for the dog. So it really builds that bond between the pet owner and the veterinary doctor where they're communicating and they're working together for the benefit of the animal and the pet owner. So we feel that will bring the costs of onboarding by 80%, but also you have the function for the CAC, customer acquisition cost, for the office manager to say, I want to look in a 10-mile radius of all the people that are using agentic pet AI. In a 10-mile radius, I want to know which dogs need a vaccine. Then you can send a direct coupon or an invite to come to the clinic with a special rate or even free because you're seeing free vet care for brand new customers. VCA launched this probably over a year ago, and other vet clinic groups now are starting to offer that to try to get customers into them. So we feel the system will pay for itself. And given the fact we recently onboarded Veterinary Growth Partners, which has over 7,300 clinics in its network, a couple of the vets have been using our Spryng technology for a couple of years. They finally felt comfortable enough to come to us and say, we want to introduce it to our veterinary membership because we're getting very good results. So we're starting to onboard so we can provide them software to try as we're ready to launch. And we're getting close. We're probably within 30 days announcing the launch of PetVivo.ai. So we're excited from that standpoint because, as you know, it's out of favor right now, SaaS model, but this is a SaaS model, but it's actually very economical that we can show the numbers. A lot of software has to deal in marketing and customer relations. It's not as easy to show the numbers. Here I can show the numbers. And given that 75% of vet clinics are owned by corporate accounts, Mars Candy, VGP, so on and so on, they're much more run not by veterinary doctors, but actually MBAs that are in finance, private equity guys. So when you show them something, we're going to reduce the efficiency of your clinic by X factor, and your return's going to be this. It's a much easier adoption than to try to sell a vet. But veterinary doctors take a while to onboard stuff. You can see that with the PRP. PRP started in humans in the 1970s. They didn't really catch on in the veterinary market until 2000.
Wow. So to date, your commercialization efforts have combined direct sales, distributor partnerships, and consumer awareness initiatives. Now, although Spryng, you mentioned as one of your lead product, I guess, was launched in the third quarter of 2021. 9 month Spryng revenue, 9 month this fiscal year, which I think ended in March of 2026. Total $400,800. And when combined with Precise PRP, you're currently operating at an annualized revenue run rate of approximately 1.1 million. So, what are the primary constraints limiting revenue growth today, and how do you plan to evolve your commercialization strategy to accelerate scaling and capture a more meaningful share of the market opportunity you described earlier? And what is the expected timeline for achieving the scale up?
So when you're introducing a disruptive product, it takes a lot of time for vets to be comfortable with it because the first use is going to be they're going to look for a dog that they already tried everything as part of their 20-year history of regimen how to treat. Then you treat that dog with Spryng and they get beneficial results. And the first thing that comes to mind to them is this is my Hail Mary go-to product when everything else fails. It takes 6 to 9 months before they start comfortable in using more standard protocol. And we're getting there. Also, we have onboarded a lot of the corporate accounts, which we didn't have before. Also, now we have 5 continue education credits, webinars on intra-articular injections that are available to veterinary doctors. So that means, a vet has to take so many CE credits to maintain their license. Well, we didn't have that certification until about a year ago. We started getting all these courses that we provide. So that has allowed us to start entering into the veterinary market. We just expanded into Mexico, UK, Denmark. We expect to get the EU within 6 to 9 months. We got Health Canada approved. And we expect, and hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll accept the French translation of our inserts because that was required. So we got a law firm out of Toronto that translated in French and says this meets all the requirements. We're just waiting for them to say go, and then we start selling into Canada. So from a global basis, we're starting to really get traction worldwide. And now we have the 6 largest distributors in the United States. We have MWI, Patterson, Covetrus, Midwest Veterinary, Penn Animal Supplies. So across the board, we've gotten traction into them. So we're finally feeling like we're getting the traction where if we hit 7 million, that would be our cash flow break even. We're burning about 1.5 a quarter. We cleaned up the balance sheet. We had 9 million in debt. We reduced it down to under 1 million, and that's more trade payables. So we're current with pretty much all the trade payables. So we got a very clean balance sheet going forward from here. And the goal is, before year end to get back on NASDAQ.
Okay, great. Actually, you answered, I think, the next question I had, just your talk about your pathway to positive cash flow profitability and the level of run rate revenues you need to achieve those targets. You mentioned $7 million. Is that can I
7
confirm?
million in revenue should get us to positive cash flow.
Okay, great. So, final question for me. If a shareholder could only track 2 or 3 operating metrics or milestones over the next year to know whether PetVivo strategy is working, what should those be? And equally important, what should they ignore?
Well, the easy one actually is our partnership with Connecticut as we announced the progression of the studies and the evolving strength between BioPiezo and PetVivo of what we're doing, because there are multiple products that will come out of that relationship for both the human side as well as the animal side. Obviously, the animal side will be much quicker than the human side, but like wound care, you can see how fast if we can inject the particles in, it would work like a liquid bandage, but yet it's helping regenerate and heal much quicker. The second one, I would say, as we move forward, we get more substantial funding in the human side. So the last 2 years, I've raised over $20 million above the market or at the market. On June 24th last year, I raised $5 million at $1 a share with the stock at 55 cents. I just raised 2.5 million at 80 cents with the stock at 65 cents. So we've been able to do what the rest of the life science people have not been able to do because it's been a very difficult life science market. It's one of the worst relative valuations in the history of the market to the S&P versus life science or pet care. Because if you look at Zoetis, their stocks in the last 18 months is down from $210 to $76 a share. And that's the leader in the industry. So we've been able to weather the storm, have the stock hold in pretty nicely. We're at about a $28 million market cap, and I expect additional capital that would probably be at or above the market coming in that gets us onto NASDAQ here. Besides that, I think more studies coming out for wound care and so on that would be quite powerful. You're going to see a lot here in the next 6 months.
Right, great. We'll look forward to that. Well, thanks, John, for walking us through PetVivo and helping us get a better understanding of the company's business strategy and where it's heading. So I'm going to pass it back to Tim.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Robert. And I'll mirror Robert's comments, John. Thank you for joining us today to talk about PetVivo. Very interesting company, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.